Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into the beginning of a really powerful story called The Narrow Way. It's all about what happens when a woman, whose life has basically been written for her, suddenly gets the chance to pick up the pen herself.
And this quote from a character named Aunt Harriet, well, it's pretty much the central question of the entire story. It's asking us, is quiet acceptance really a virtue? Or is it just fear dressed up to look nice? Let's see how this whole idea plays out. So let's set the scene. The year is 1848, and we meet Margaret Lennox. She's 29, she's unmarried, and she's living in her sister's house. After her father died, she kind of fell into this very specific and honestly stifling social role, one that's come to define her entire life.
Margaret herself calls her life a pleasant nullity. Think about that for a second. While she's grateful for her sister taking her in, that gratitude feels like a cage. She's supposed to be helpful, but not too assertive, present, but not a burden. Basically, it's a life where she gets absolutely no say in her own future.
But then, just when you think this is it for her, a letter arrives. And inside that letter is a possibility she hadn't let herself dream of for years. It's this tiny crack of light in a world that felt completely sealed shut.
So what's in the letter? A legacy from her late Aunt Harriet, £400. Now, for the super rich, this would be nothing. But for Margaret, who has absolutely zero of her own, it's a fortune. It's everything.
And right here, you can see how two people can look at the exact same thing and see something completely different. For her very practical sister, Catherine, this money is just a nice little bit of security, a small annual income. But for Margaret, it's not about the money at all. It represents the one thing she desperately wants: choice. And with that tiny glimmer of possibility, a dream she'd buried deep down starts to stir. It's this idea she's had for years: to open a small school for girls. A place where she could finally put her own education, a rare gift from her unconventional father, to good use. For the first time in a very long time, she feels alive. But of course, it's not that simple. Pursuing this dream means she's about to hit a wall of opposition. She has to define not only what her family wants for her, but also all the unwritten rules of society that say what a woman's proper place is. Her sister, Catherine, is pretty much the voice of convention. She lays out all the reasons why this is just a terrible idea. The risk, the gossip, the simple fact that it's just not something a woman does. She's telling Margaret to just accept the world as it is. But Margaret's response, at least inside her own head, is this quiet but incredibly powerful rebellion. She has this breakthrough moment where she realizes that if you just accept the way things are, you're actually helping to keep them that way. Change, she realizes, only happens when people refuse to accept the world as it is. This piece of advice from an old friend seems to be the final push she needs. I mean, sure, the fear of failure is real, but what's the alternative? A life wondering what if? And just like that, her mind is made up. She's going to do it. So she does it. She leaves the comfortable cage of her sister's home and heads for the remote, windswept village of Arnby. This is it. This is where she's going to try and build a life completely on her own terms. And as soon as she gets to this small village, she finds herself caught between two very powerful men. On one side, you have the Reverend Pemberton. He's all about tradition and order, and he sees Margaret as a serious disruption. On the other side, you've got the landowner, Mr. Fenton, a man of new ideas who seems to think she's a breath of fresh air. Her entire future is probably going to hinge on how she navigates the tension between these two. So even though the vicar gives her a pretty cold welcome, Margaret doesn't back down. She finds this little stone wash house, converts it into her schoolroom, and gets ready to open the doors, with absolutely no idea if a single student is even going to show up. But they do. On February 1st, 1849, 7 pupils arrive. Now, 7 might seem like a tiny number, but for Margaret, it is a huge victory. It's 7 girls from all different parts of village life. It's a real, tangible beginning. But here's the twist. There's a student among them that she totally didn't expect, one who was sent without any notice. The 7th pupil is a 10-year-old girl named Grace Fenton, the niece and ward of the landowner, Mr. Fenton, the other major power player in town. And Grace is a puzzle. She's the model student, perfectly behaved, quiet, super efficient. But Margaret gets this unsettling feeling that her perfection isn't natural.
It's more like a suit of armor, an acquired caution that tells you this is a kid who has learned the world is not a safe place. And we get our most heartbreaking clue about Grace's inner world from a composition she writes. In this analogy, she reveals this incredibly deep, almost premature understanding of fear and duty and just enduring. It's like we're getting a peek behind the armor at a child who sees fear not as a choice, but as something you just have to survive.
And that's really where Margaret's journey truly begins. It's suddenly about so much more than just building a school for girls. It's about creating a sanctuary for one girl in particular. And her story brings us full circle, right back to that question she had to ask herself in the beginning. A question that I think applies to all of us. When you're facing fear and convention and a whole lot of uncertainty, what really is the alternative to trying?